Hey, Naveen. I'm doing well. Give me a sec. Hello, James. Um, the thing that might be interesting here is the link that I sent to the getter seems to be different than the link that is the live one. Give me one sec. Let me double check this. And if Exactly. And the getter one might be wrong. So let me double check one other thing. Going over here. We will find out. Hey, Simon. Nothing much. Just working through some technical difficulties. It's a sadness. How are you doing? Yes, exactly. That is essentially what this feels like. Let me check one thing really fast. We might want to switch over to a different thing. Let's check. Okay. Yep. Yeah. So I'm going to send you all, let's try this. I'm going to send you all a different link, and I'm going to put it in the, let's double check this, but why would it be different? So let's try this out. Boom. Okay. I'm putting it in the chat window here, and I'm also putting it in the getter. So go to that one. Hello, Mike. And I think that one should be the correct one. So try to click on, I just sent a message into the Google Hangout. So click on that, and then you should all be in a different a different call that is an actual Hangout on air. Aha, better. Hello, Simon. You're over here now. Is that right?
Yeah. This looks
Yes.
good.
Okay, sweet. Bad link. Sorry. Here. Okay. Perfect. Well, everybody, welcome. That was an easy enough switch, luckily. Cool. So thank you all for being here. Excited to kind of dive into this stuff, and especially excited that both Simon and Mike are here, who are two of the leading thinkers in cryptoeconomic primitives. So at a high level, the goal is to, I want to talk about a high level goal, talk a little bit about and do some introductions around, very quick introductions, and then we're going to dive in and do this thing called a lean coffee, where we essentially up prioritize the things that we all want to up prioritize. So with that, remember the high level goal here, this is part of this ETH Commons co-op work, where we're trying to kind of build some bottom-up cross-project collaboration in an easier way so that people can get into things like decentralized governance and cryptoeconomic primitives, and we can do more learning through that over time. And specifically, that's all for this macro goal of hoping to, and converging exponential technology, trying to make sure that we can transition well into this next stage of humanity. So with that, I want to also do a quick little introduction myself. My name's Reese Lundmark. I'm into cryptoeconomic primitives. I do a podcast. I like ETH Commons stuff. And let's just go to, does everyone do a quick intro, and I'll write the order on the right side, starting with Simon.
So, hey guys, Simon.
Is everybody able to hear anybody? I don't think I can hear people.
Can you not hear me?
Yeah, we can.
All right.
I can.
Yeah,
I can hear you.
No.
I had to drop out and join again. No, I can hear.
Drop and join again. Good.
Yeah.
We're gonna keep going, and Naveen, you should hopefully deal with your.
I will do that then.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, Simon.
Okay, yeah, Simon de la Riviere. I've been working in the blockchain space for a while. I have mainly two large interests, which is working in Uja Music, which is trying to make artists more of a living using blockchain technology. And then I'm also spending a lot of time in this context on something called curation markets, which is trying to reduce information asymmetry in the market by producing tokenized signals. And that's like the very broad thing. That description can probably encompass many more things, but that's like the broad idea there.
Cool. Thank you for being here, Simon. Naveen, can you hear us? Sounds like a no. Let's go to Mike.
Hey, I'm Mike. I know everybody on this call, but I guess for the benefit of anybody watching, I'm a programmer and I work on token curated registries.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Mike. And then James.
Hi, everybody. I'm James, working on a project called Video, which is like a network of curation markets for authentic human creativity. And yeah, I'm really excited to talk to both Simon and Mike again.
Great.
You as well.
Sounds good.
Yet, though.
Well, Naveen is trying to get in and out. So let's try out this lean coffee thing. So the way this works is, hello, Joel. The way that this lean coffee works is if you go to that Trello group or the Trello board, the way that you're going to do it is we're going to take essentially like 2 or 3 minutes to write down topics that we want to talk about into the Circle 1 list here. So you can see I'm in there just like typing in random stuff. Type in things that you want to talk about, that you want the group to talk about. And then we're going to take about like 2 minutes to do that. And then we'll take about a minute to vote on them as well. Does that make sense? So it's a way to crowdsource an agenda. And we're starting now. Cool. Let's take about 1 more minute with your agenda items, proposed agenda items. There are no wrong answers. More is better than less.
Hello.
Hey, Naveen, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Success. Okay, good. So for everybody who's new, we are adding cards to the Trello board on the right side in order to crowdsource an agenda here. And with that, we're actually going to start voting. So if people want to, everybody, let's take about 3 votes and take about a minute here for things that you want to talk about. For things that you want to talk about and discuss in this meeting.
Where do we vote?
Oh, sorry. So you press the V button on a given card, and that upvotes that card.
Oh, I see. There's a vote button. Oh, cool. All right, sweet.
Okay, take 30 more seconds to get your votes in. And
I feel like we need some like Survivor background music.
I agree. Having good with my old company, we definitely have music during this time, but tougher to do across the interwebs. I guess I was wrong. One person gets to sing. Okay, so we got some votes here. I'm gonna bring up the high vote things, and so essentially what we do now is I will have a timer, and we essentially vote. We essentially start talking. Whoever wrote the card starts off the conversation, says, "This is what the goal of this card was. Here's what we want to talk about," and then we all discuss it. And then we essentially, I'll put a time cap at like probably 5 minutes, maybe for it, 4 or 5 minutes, and then we talk about it. And at that time cap, I'll say, "Okay, we're stopping," and then we all choose and vote on if we want to take more time on that card. Does that sound good? So with that, I'm going to start with this top one, this defining cryptoeconomic primitives card. And this is one, so this is my card. This is one where, like, there are curation markets, there are token curated registries, and then there's this outstanding question of, should things like prediction markets be put into this? Should some oracles be put into this? Should things at the protocol level, like proof of work, proof of stake, be put into this? Things like bonding or state trees or Merkle trees. And I'm thinking about this actively myself as well in organizing ETH Denver and wondering like how to bucket different people that are coming. So what are other people's thoughts on how you would define a cryptoeconomic primitive and what should fit in that bucket?
One initial thought is like, so on the one hand, I don't care a whole lot about semantics and like any interesting idea, we can discuss, of course. But if we did want to categorize things in that way, I always think of incentive games. Like, is something an incentive game? Is a prediction market an incentive game where, like, I don't know, that's an interesting question. Is a prediction market an incentive game? I mean, if it's just resolved by an oracle and the oracle is like always correct in the eyes of God, then I don't know if that's an incentive game or not. It's kind of an interesting question. But that's just how I
oracles
frame
are
it
an
myself.
incentive game, but the prediction market itself might not be.
Yeah, it depends on what the oracle is. And maybe prediction markets are. I don't know the answer to this. It's an interesting question.
Other thoughts on this?
Wait. Yeah, I thought prediction markets are incentive games, right? Is there anything that's not an incentive game?
Well, how would you say a prediction market is an incentive game? Like, how do people participate in it?
I think a good way a prediction market can be classified as incentive game is, just by the act of making the market, you incentivize people to bring information to the market.
Yeah, they might not all be incentive games, but they can be, right?
Yeah.
What would
it's like,
what would an example of a token market that's not an incentive game?
Well, a prediction market is not necessarily like a token market. Like, you can denominate a prediction market in any token, or even like, potentially like a heterogeneous basket of tokens.
Right,
And like
but
the outcome of the prediction market probably has nothing to do with like the underlying value of the token that is being like bet with. You know what I'm saying?
okay. Yeah, okay. I see what you mean. So it's more a case of that there's a more sustained feedback loop in that ecosystem where the actions carry across, so to speak. Because, yeah, the language, I guess, matters, because like if you just say incentive game, it is a game where people incentivize to do things just by the fact that the markets exist. But I think, Mike, you're the more specifically thinking of the fact that that information is carried maybe across interactions. Is that something that's a good way to frame it, or?
I don't know. I'm talking off the top of my head, and I'm pouring myself a second cup of coffee. But it just like, I guess, and we can define this as broadly as we want. I mean, I don't really even. I mean, a base question that we might entertain is like, why do we even care what a cryptoeconomic primitive is? Why not just talk about what's interesting to us?
Could I push on that for a second? Because I think it is. I mean, I'm a huge fan of naming, and something like Chris Berniski's crypto assets and him trying to push that hashtag on Twitter, I think is a great example of this. And I think it's actually crucial where we say, hey, when we say cryptoeconomic primitive, I think it is helpful to have a basket of things that's not, that token curated registries and curation markets are of a similar ilk. And then the question is it larger than that? Is it less large than that? So that when new people come into the ecosystem, they know what this shared bucket looks like. And I'm imagining things just like, when we talk about like traditional computer science design patterns or whatever, there are kind of good buckets there. So I think it's helpful both for us in terms of framing the buckets, and I think it's helpful for new people in terms of understanding the buckets.
It's like it's like naming the tools rather. Like it's like here's a set of potential tools that you have available. I think perhaps the interesting line, because like some of the things in crypto economics is not new, right? A prediction market isn't new to the space, right? It existed before blockchains were around. So I think the things that make it somewhat different is to say, like, what are the primitives that we are now capable of having that weren't possible before? And Token Curator registry is one of them, right? The properties, like Mike's crypto systems manifesto, is a good set of criteria to say this fits into certain criteria to classify it as a crypto economic system, while it might be subsumed into a larger set of incentive games, one of which is a prediction market.
Yeah, I mean, prediction markets, I would say prediction markets, they definitely, okay, so moving out of the incentive game definition and just saying cryptoeconomic primitives, they do feel very much like cryptoeconomic primitives because they're like well understood things that you can like apply to, any number of problems, and you have some decent assumptions about like how they can be used and how they will be used. So sure, I would say they are cryptoeconomic primitives, even if they're not incentive games.
Okay, so that is our 5 minutes. So everybody type in the chat side on the side. You can either vote, you're voting for how many minutes you want this conversation to continue. So it can either be 0 or it can be up to like 4. Let's take Naveen, you got to vote.
I'll give an audio vote because I'm on the phone. 4.
4. Okay, let's take 2 more minutes. Billy, someone who voted 4. Billy, what would you like to talk about? Oh, you can go through chat. Yeah, that's fine. And as you chat, I want to say one quick thing on them, which is so keep typing, Billy. Another thing for me is how often does it come to your mind when you are thinking about these systems? So like for me, it's almost impossible for my mind not to think in terms of like token curator registries and curation markets and prediction markets when I'm thinking about things that I want to exist in the world and thinking about like incentive games, and they just keep on coming up into my mind as like continuous design patterns. So I think that there's also, and I'm thinking about like the game of 4 and those like object-oriented design patterns with like command, things like that. It's like those are the things that have kind of percolated to the top in terms of how often you use them in projects. So I think that's something it's going to be this tough loop where we determine, hey, how often is this stuff being actually implemented in code in the real world? And honestly, that might be something, I know, Simon, you're doing a little bit of this work, but I'd love to see more work in terms of how often, who's using token curator registries, curation markets, prediction markets, and that as a way to kind of bubble up cryptoeconomic primitives. So from Bill here, he has a question. He put a quick TCR together over the weekend, came to the conclusion that there was too much incentive to not allow a challenge to succeed because the voters have to share so much of the bounty. And so why not just reward the original posters as well? I'll let someone else take that question.
What do you mean by original posters? Like the applicant, the candidate? Why not reward the candidate for the outcome of the challenge? Is that the question? I mean, the candidate is rewarded if they win the challenge. Like if they get challenged and the challenge fails, and they do, they get a carve out of the challenger's deposit. So they are rewarded if the challenge fails. Yeah, it's symmetrical.
Boom. Learning learned. Perfect. That was helpful. Okay, we're going to switch away from any final thoughts on defining cryptoeconomic primitives?
I would like to say, just going on your design pattern analogy, that's great. I do just want to think on the product side as well. I've been playing with modeling the OCI 7-layer network thing for crypto, and if people want to like work on that side of things as well, it's just a thing that I've been working on. So standardization on this side of things always helps. So good on you.
Cool. I think we're going to talk a little bit about standardization later, perhaps. So yeah, in fact, in this next card, reusable code bases. This is from Simon.
Yeah, so I mean, at this point in time, I think because of the fact that there are some interesting models that have crept up, like token curated registries, is that I think many of us want to play around with it and experiment with it. And I've been trying, like from my side with my work on curation markets, or more specifically, like the bonding curves code, is that I've written some of it, but it's not tested at all. It's not audited. And it's under some repo, under the consensus repo, for example. And the token curated registries code, that's under the @chain or /metax code bases. Like, I think once we get to something where we can, have a community stamp and say, like, these are great reusable code bases, it would be great to get to that point, because then we can more rapidly start rolling out many of these experiments. So just like want to voice that, like, we're getting to the point now where probably in the next 2-3 months we'll have reusable code bases. And like, should we say, okay, cool, like if you want to do token creator registry, like we should say that this is the gold standard, so to speak, and maybe there should be a token creator registry to define.
Yeah, exactly, classic. A quick question on that is, how should this relate? And I'm not as familiar with ERCs in general, ERC20, 721, etc. Should things like TCRs or curation markets eventually turn into ERCs? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, probably. Most likely, because there's also recently a new one that was proposed by the Uport team, which is a generic claims registry. So it might mean that a token curated registry becomes a subset of that EIP, for example. And so standardization around APIs is useful, even though the functionality might be slightly different. Just like having a set of APIs that's useful would be great. I think some of these APIs or standardizations is more important, especially if you consider it might be reused. So ERC20 was quite important because it was immediately obvious that people were going to build decentralized exchanges, and so they had to conform to the APIs in order to work with them. The question is, will something like a token curated registry require a large amount of on-chain interoperability? And it's not fairly straightforward that that would be the case in the short term. So it might not be that important, but at some point it might be more important later, I think.
I have not yet imagined, though it's possible, but I've not yet imagined where like TCRs need to be like highly interoperable on chain. But it would be useful if they had a standard API, one, because I think they can. And if they did, that means you could write a front end that would just take the address of any TCR and generate a UI for it. That's the thing that I've been thinking would be useful.
Yeah, that makes sense, that having the API primarily from a UX perspective, not necessarily from interoperability perspective, might be the top thing here. I guess, and Mike, what on the right side, and this, by the way, this is a good meta pattern for us to use. If you have thoughts as other people are talking, type them into the right side chat, and then they'll get brought up. So Mike, could you talk a little bit more about licensing?
Yeah, so with the @chain implementation, we had like in our contract with MetaX, Consensus was a consultant to build that. In the contract, it said, we have to open source it under a permissive license, and we got it Apache 2 licensed, which means we can, the community can basically do anything with it. It's a very, very unrestrictive license. And so I forked the @chain repo. The @chain repo is frozen for auditing now, but TCR development is continuing in another repo. So just like, it would have been really, really bad if the @chain registry repo had not been, permissively licensed. It just would have been a real headache for a lot of reasons.
Don't license your cryptoeconomic primitives, whether TCRs, curation markets, or any going forward. Let's do, so time is about up here, and we're talking about reusable code bases. Everybody right on the right-hand side here, how many more minutes do you want to talk about this? Cool, we're gonna take 2 more minutes. Someone who wrote a 2, what do you want to talk about?
So I'm going to publish to EPM as soon as I get unblocked by a truffle bug, the PLCR voting repo. And then following that, I'll publish the TCR repo to EPM. I really like EPM, and I feel like it should be used more in general. Does anyone else have things that they would like to publish on EPM? Because I would love to help you do it if you don't know how.
And that's Ethereum Project Management, Package Manager?
The Ethereum Package Manager.
Great, got it. One that comes to the top of my mind just moving is like, Simon, are there certain bonding curve, kind of breaking curation markets into its two pieces? Are there like bonding curve implementations that might be able to be pushed up there?
Yeah, so I think probably, barring someone else working on that in the short term, because I'm not actively developing this, or there's no team at Consensus actively developing bonding curves, but because of the fact that many teams are interested in building this, I'm hoping there will be an implementation going live soon. But I built an initial implementation of bonding curves that is under the curation markets repo under the Consensus GitHub. And that just allows you to mint a token based on a specific curve. But I might not, I need to go check it out again to make sure whether it's good or not. But I think that primitive itself, just the bonding curve primitive, I kind of want to pull it out and just write smart contract code for that. So barring anyone else taking that and working with it, I think that's a good place to start. There's two teams that are probably going to start working on probably the same thing soon. That's the Meme Factory team and the Zap Store team. So I need to talk with them and ask them, like, what code bases are you going to use here? Are you starting from scratch? Or are you going to take the code that I've written? What are you going to use here? So I think that's a good thing in the short term, just to find out from those teams to see how they're going to implement their bonding curves.
Great, that seems good. And I'll make a note to link to all these things, both in the EPM and bonding curve stuff after this. So let's move on to the next question here, which is biggest risks. And this is really just kind of an open-ended question. There's actually 1, 2, 3, 4 questions here. And this is just kind of a high-level thing about what are our biggest risks here? What assumptions are we testing? What experiments are we running in parallel? What learning can we share with each other? This is because the macro goal here is to make it the case that these new cryptoeconomic primitives can be used for good incentive games in the future that will help humanity or whatever. So I guess what are some of these, what do people think are the top experiments that we're running or learning that we can share with each other?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Cool. I've been thinking a lot recently about who's going to be playing these games, and I'm very curious to hear if you guys have thought much about this. So an obvious point seems to be to me that one of the biggest incentive games that exists right now is Wikipedia, except without sort of monetary incentives. And then also I think of kind of Amazon Mechanical Turk is in a way a similar kind of incentive game, and then obviously the public markets. But thinking of even the ad chain example, where any projects people are thinking of actually building, I think they seem to rely on there being a population of people who are, for some reason, interested in hanging out on this website and curating a whitelist for money. And I'm very curious to see how that kind of plays out in practice.
Yeah, one of the most important experiments that I think will happen in probably 2018 is looking at how TCRs perform, which have different, whose token holding populations have different compositions. Will bodies of token holders that are highly dispersed and decentralized perform better or worse than the cabal of whales that can coordinate more easily. These days, I'm actually thinking that if you did a red team, blue team, you had two TCRs doing the same job and had one where you did an ICO and sold all the tokens to the crowd, and one where you had the whale cabal, I think the whale cabal might perform better. But I don't know, we just have to do that experiment and find out.
Yeah, I think another thing that comes to my mind when asking this question is Because I think there's a lot of so with something like Mechanical Turk, there's been pushback on Mechanical Turk and other kind of sharing economy platforms where you say, hey, these are people who are essentially just being used for small amounts of time, and all that money is going up to Amazon and up to Uber and whatever. So I think that's something that we all need to think about as we design these systems, is this thing called platform cooperativism, which is the idea that both ownership and voting power and governance are decentralized among the people themselves, so that we make it, if we create some kind of TCR that is actually like being bad to people, that's not just like all the money's going to us, like they don't have any voting power or whatever. So I think that's another thing I think about with Morgan's question.
I think my gut feels full of many of these systems is that in the short term, we are expecting people to maintain and curate them, right? And once the sort of systems prove themselves, then we're probably going to see a large amount of these things being curated by other programs. Machine learning algorithms trying to figure out the market and playing them amongst themselves. And once that happens, then there will be orders of magnitude more curatorial opportunity for a lot more programs to do this work. And we don't quite know what's going to happen in that scenario. It might mean that someone like Google just if Google were to say, we're involved in this curated registry, then the whole focal point game just goes to that registry, because no one's going to beat Google in terms of market information. So they're just going to win with that registry. It might be detrimental to the value of these things because of their power they have about the information in the world. But I think generally in the short term, it will be people, and then we'll get to a whole new phase where suddenly it's AIs versus AIs trying to compete in curating information.
Yep, I agree with that. One question I have kind of related to this stuff, it's just another top question here, is I guess in terms of, is there a way to, like in terms of testing these things, can we test them in a way, can we test some of these incentive games in a quicker way rather than just purely through code? I know that and I guess what I'm saying here is there a way for us to maybe as a group do something like curate a playlist through a Google spreadsheet where we're allowed to, and that Google spreadsheet essentially has baked into it through all of us the rules of like a TCR or whatever. I'm thinking about ways that we can more quickly prototype some of these incentive games to get learning about them instead of just purely on the code side. So what do people think about that?
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the things that's like most frustrating for me as a software developer is it's hard to be, I find it hard to be like agile in designing these things. The reason being, like, if you deploy one of these on a test net where the underlying assets have no value, that data is like useless in terms of determining how people will actually behave. And I don't know how to test them without like going to production.
No, I just want to rebut that, because Reese's point of doing it on a Google Sheet in a playlist keeps this agile, because we can stake whatever that token is to our social credibility, right? Oh, Naveen did this, and guess what? Naveen's choice wasn't picked, so he lost X or whatever. So there's a way to kind of bootstrap this with social credibility as the token. So that's one. And I did want to talk about the previous topics. Access is something that somebody else brought up. I'm not sure who. Piggybacking off of Reese's point about platform cooperatism, thinking about access matters a lot. And initiatives like this, where we are building for use instead of building for tech, right? Instead of thinking about user problems, will kind of by default clear some assumptions that we have. So yeah, I'm totally for doing that experiment on a Google Sheet, just to kind of let everybody know.
Cool. So let's, we're out of time for this thing. So on the right-hand side, write down how much longer you would like to talk about either, about any of this bucket. We got 4 votes. People need to be faster with the voting these days. I don't know. We're going to take 2 more minutes. other thoughts on either of these things, MVPing. I'm especially interested in MVPing some of these incentive games on through other ways.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about this, but I know that when oh crap, what's his name? The prediction market guy.
Martin Kopelman, Matt Liston, Joey Krug.
No, the inventor of it.
Oh, Robin Hanson.
Robin Hanson, yes. When I know that Robin Hanson did a lot of experiments about prediction markets at the time of inventing them. So I was just kind of curious if anyone knows if there are people in social science that are interested in TCRs or cryptoeconomic primitives more broadly. And if not, that's a very good population to sort of set up tests.
Love it.
You know, and like in social sciences, the whole sort of like pattern of like using students to publish a paper.
Yeah, that's a good place to check because we do know that Robin Hanson did a lot of experiments with prediction markets, and the question is, how did they do it, right? How did they run these tests in various scenarios? Was there actual value involved? Was there some skin in the game? How large were these experiments? How small were they? It would be interesting to know for sure.
Any other thoughts on this this card?
One thing about social stuff is, I'm very sorry, I just want to make this point. Reproducibility has never been a strong point of social sciences. So maybe we want to focus on studies that have enough data for replicability.
Cool. And Simon, what were you going to say as well?
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I've been working on the curation markets / bonding curves is that one of the goals was just the ability to kickstart these things substantially faster. Meaning we don't have to go through a multi-week token launch and et cetera, et cetera. It's just, if there's intent or interest, you kickstart it, you start bonding the tokens yourself and get a bunch of people involved to start playing with it. So it feels like it could bootstrap quicker. So it's like kind of the middle phase between like testnet or spreadsheet style testing versus sort of more production style testing, somewhere in the middle.
Yep. Cool. So let's move on to the next card here, which is project updates. So I think that, I mean, maybe what could be possible here is, so that I have things: progress, goals, shared challenges. Maybe I feel like starting with maybe Simon or Mike and you guys, because you guys are kind of shelling points for people chatting with you about these things. So could you tell us like how you see the ecosystem right now and who you know that's working on it, stuff like that?
I guess I could start. So at this point in time, I think the sort of updates in the curation markets and bonding curve side is I publish a monthly Medium post that is like updates on teams that have either contacted me or shared some ideas, and that's like a good place to go read up on like what's transpiring. At this point in time, my own work in the space has slowed down a bit, just because I've been involved with UJOs a bit more. So I've written less, and I've written less articles and like less code, but I'm trying to figure out how I can spin up more of this in the new year. But it's like I feel like in a sense my involvement is becoming less important as more people are picking up on the ideas. So I'll see what happens in the year. But yeah, it's continuing. I'm just curious to see an implementation go live, and then we can actually see what happens. And it should happen in the first quarter of next year. Holding thumbs.
Yeah. Mike, any updates either like from what you know about the space from a macro level?
Yeah, I just posted something in the Gitter, which is a paper that just came out yesterday. It's a decentralized dispute arbitration system for the bounties that will, well, I shouldn't say, we're hoping it'll come out in 2018, like in production. So that's a thing. I am doing called a resource allocation committee. This is some census internals that you're getting to see tomorrow, where I'm going to pitch the company and say like, hey, team just working on token curated registry stuff full time, because there's a lot of projects, both and out of consensus, that are exploring token curated registries now. For them, it's possible that will get funded, and then there will be, like several people in consensus working on this full time. Yeah, I think 2018 should be a big year for like taking things to production.
Cool. And I guess the other thing here is just to know what other people. So Morgan, you're from Ocean, is that right? And you guys are using both curation markets and token curated registries. Any project update from you there?
Hey, yes, that's correct. Yeah, we're actually just starting in on writing a white paper now. The extent to which we use TCRs and curation markets is kind of a big question for me, especially because from a product perspective, they're completely untested. So if we put them in a white paper, they're kind of it's at the level of a proposal to try something, not at the level of like it can't really be firmly included as part of a protocol at this point. Yeah, basically we're kind of actively exploring for the next 2 months what we can do.
Cool, that makes sense. Thibault, are you guys working on any cryptoeconomic primitives?
I don't know. I'm not at the moment. I think I'm mostly learning about this stuff now. No definite plans to implement it.
Cool. Anybody else? Either Aaron or Naveen or James or Billy, any project updates from you guys?
Yeah, this is Naveen. So I am launching a new project called Standard Meta, which was designed to be the central, a decentralized but logically central place for repos that Mike and Simon were talking about. So instead of having it under consensus or under some other ad chain things protocol, the crypto primitive, just the definition of it, I would believe would be better served by being under Standard Meta's repo ecosystem, whatever. So I'm working on building that out, and I'm working with Neil from Stake Tree, and using that as a negative interest annuity or a not or an annuity that pays less than what the thing's worth, and using that to kind of bootstrap a TCR. So those are updates. Should be live first week of Jan. So fingers crossed.
Cool, that makes sense. And if possible, and I think at a high level here, Simon has these updates that he writes every month for this stuff, and I think it'd be great to be able to create a Google Doc where people can add to that Google Doc, and then both Simon and other people can say, "Hey, here's what's happening," and other people from the ecosystem can just add to that Google Doc as necessary. Anybody?
Platform independent, dude. Come on, GitHub. No Google Doc.
right. I have this. There's this balance. I know. I pretty much agree with that. Other people, James, Maria, Billy, or Aaron, any project updates from you guys specifically around cryptoeconomic primitives?
Yeah, I can share what we've been working on. So we've got what's called the Multidimensional Tokens Standard, which is the ERC88, and I'd love to talk to you, Mike, about the EPM. Wasn't familiar, but that's enabling the multidimensional view token protocol, which is the supply side of our marketplace, which is decentralized. And the bidding layer is what we're migrating to a new testnet right now. So that should be live soon. Getting ready to, enjoy 2018 like the rest of us.
And what was the ERC number there?
88, of course.
88. Nice. Okay, sweet. Thank you, James. Maria or Billy or Aaron, any specific cryptoeconomic primitive updates from you guys? If you're working on it.
No hi. Hi. Pleasure. Thanks, Aaron, for the invitation. I'm working with a legal block. Legal block is a legal community. It's an experiment of collective wisdom.
Oh, I think you may have cut out there. Can anybody? Yeah. So Maria, I think you're frozen. If possible, if you can turn off your video, that can help to do this. So Maria, we'll come back to you in a second. Billy or Aaron, are you guys working on any of this stuff?
At the moment, I'm just really interested in the ideas. and just really listening to what you guys have got to say. To be honest with you, I've been following the concept for a while, but we are not actually building anything with it at the moment. So
cool. Well, thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Maria, you're back. Okay, Maria, it might be good if you turned off your video, and then I think we'll be able to fully hear you the entire time. So yeah, Maria, give us the law thing again.
Okay, legal block.
Yep.
It's an summary. Okay, it's an experiment that we're working right now with the legal community based on collective wisdom, and we are watching the behavior right now of the community. We just issued a conceptual paper. And what we're doing is experimenting right now, voting methods and what's the behavior of the community with the first activity we have. The first activity, just to put the clear, is it's going to be a discussion about the interactive coin offering, where Christopher Brown is going to be in the community answering questions. So we have all this activity coordinated. The way we work is we are catalysts, and the lawyers are the lawyers, the community. Okay, so the goal of this activity is trying to narrow the gap between what developers are building and what regulators are trying to understand. Okay, if we can bring the protocol, interactive coin offer protocol, and put the discussion as a protocol for self-regulation, and we have been working this along with Jason and TrueBit community, the outcome of this is going to be a report, a review recommendation with designated lawyers, and all the process is based on vote, liquid democracy. You can postulate yourself, or you can delegate your vote for the draft of the report. So this is an experiment. We're not talking about token, we're talking about reputation and points, because we're trying to measure the behavior. Okay, we have the testing right now, and following the work you have been doing, I've been following for a while, trying to get, after this activity, see how is the behavior, try to get into the second step of the paper, which is it's going to be the model of incentives.
Got
okay,
it. So are you using either token curated registries or curation markets in that incentive part of the paper? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, actually, the first part of the paper is the conceptual paper. Okay, we're not talking yet about incentives. I mean about the token. Okay, we're not talking about token yet. We're experimenting with points, reputation, voting, to see how is the behavior. Okay, of the coordination. That's what we're testing right now. But it's obviously based on the voting. They're going to have points for reputation, points, no token, because we don't have token. That's what we're trying to select experiment before we come up with, let's do this. And we're going to have a token, and we're going to have a TCR for membership. And before that, we're testing what is the behavior.
Got it.
Which is a legal community. Okay, so in the back stage, I'm following the work you have been doing, sharing the drafts with guys from the community, trying to get feedback on that. So that's what we're doing right now.
Cool. Well, definitely when we get that link or that Google Docs/GitHub of all the projects, we definitely love Legal Block on there. I guess let's probably, does anybody else have any project updates? If not, we're going to transition. Boom, we are transitioning. Okay, sweet. So let's do this let's do a specific one actually. This is from Mike. Do you want to talk about TCRs for IPFS multi-hash prepend assignments?
Oh yeah, this is just an idea that I've had for a while. So like IPFS has this like multi-hash standard where the high level idea is you prepend some additional data to a hash, and that prepended data tells you what type of hashing function produced this, what is the encoding, et cetera, et cetera. And right now, the table of what these prepends mean is just stored in like a spreadsheet in a Git repo, and it's maintained by I guess like the IPFS team. this type of thing, I think, would be cool. Like, it would be cool to see this type of thing decentrally governed, you know, with like tokens, say. So I think this could be like a fun, cool, like non-commercial project to experiment with, you know, governance of community standards using something like a TCR.
Yeah, I think that this gets at two overlaps. One is how much TCRs overlap with governance in general, because governance is often who are, if you saw the recent Vitalik piece, it's who are the people that get to put inputs into the decision. And that should probably be some kind of TCR-like thing or what have you. And so that's, I think, a good question, how that overlaps. And I'll be talking about, I have a talk on Thursday, another one of these calls, but on decentralized governance, and we'll definitely be talking about overlaps with cryptoeconomic primitives and governance. And the other thing that gets at for me is thinking about what are these top, what are the top prioritized pieces of work that should be kind of upgraded in terms of what should be experimented with. So I think that this is a good example of that.
I think my opinion on that is that some of these things where it's like where you govern a list essentially, and in the case of, you know, IPFS or Protocol Labs team trying to maintain a registry of the multi-hash prepends, it's the thing is the overhead is quite low, and I don't think there will be, like, the governance of that is fairly low. So the question is, if you're going to implement a system with a certain kind of complexity like a TCR, its value needs to be enough that the transaction cost to use it is not more than the value you're getting out of it. So I think in the case of something like, there's only a handful of things that should get into a multi-hash prepend list, and it will not be extensive over time. And, you know, there's no problem in governance. There's no potential Sybil attacks, or there's no potential issues with, you know, Juan Benet Protocol Labs forking the repo and changing the multi-hash prepends. It doesn't feel like it might be useful in that context, but it might be. It might be. And I think that's the interesting thing that we're going to see with, or what I want to see with experiments with TCRs is, as Mike put it in the paper, what's the minimum viable economy for these things? Like, what's the, or like the maximum or minimal viable economy to deploy these things? So it might be useful, might be not. I think it should be at least proposed. I think it should be interesting.
Cool. Well, we have about 8 minutes, 7-ish minutes here. So I'm going to transition kind of closer to pseudo wrap-up mode. And so what we're going to do is a couple things. So first, we're going to write on that Google. Let's start with this pretty much. Yeah. So on the Trello board, which is relinking to the side here, just in case, we're going to do a little quick retro. And this is, we're going to put a plus right here, and then we're going to put a delta. And this is where you say, hey, what is one or more things that you thought were good about this? And then delta are one or more things that you're like, hey, this wasn't great, or like things that you'd like to see for next time. So let's take a couple minutes, maybe like 3 minutes, for people to write. And please be brutal, be honest, be critical, whatever. The goal is for this to be valuable for people, and for us to be able to build off of this in the future. So if you want to take a little bit of time to add anything that you want in the plus column and then anything you want in the delta column, let's do that now. We're going to take like 3 minutes. I've written 2 out of the 3 things, so let's go, people. There we go. About 1 more minute. Okay, finish writing up those last thoughts here. Got a dog in my background. Okay, sweet. Well, thank you for that feedback. It will be incorporated into future things. And I guess one thing here is that it looks like this in-depth, having some more in-depth discussions, a more defined agenda, I think is something that we're likely to experiment with next time, to maybe do some of this voting initially and then up prioritize and say, okay, great, here are these couple big topics that we want to talk about, that kind of thing. So that seems good. I guess in these final 3 minutes, does anybody, I just want to leave it open for anybody to talk about anything that they want to talk about. Anybody have anything top of mind that they want to discuss?
Yeah, I had a quick question for Simon, if we have time. So you mentioned what you've been doing in terms of the bonding curves, part of the curation markets repository. Is that just like the same in, same out implementation right now, and you need kind of like the diversion or the difference to be possible? Or where are you at, like, descriptively in that functionality?
Yeah, so I mean, like, I haven't even written tests for it, so it's you know, it works in a sense of there's the syntax errors. So I haven't tested it properly at all. But I had Gonzalo from the Consensus Diligence team had a look over it, and he's already proposed some bug fix things. So it's definitely not even test ready yet. So, but the sort of the things of how you do exponential fractions and things like that's in Solidity, so it's gas efficient, stuff like that's in there. And you specify how many tokens you will mint, and it calculates the cost and goes up and down the curve. Sorry, correction there. Currently, the curve is only for minting, and it uses the sort of a different curve to burn or to remove the tokens. But I think in the short term, I would actually prefer if we just stick to like one curve going in and out for like complexity reasons. I think that's more simpler to define and experiment with than going and saying, why is there a different curve for going out? It's sort of, you're just introducing more complexity that's necessary at this point in time. So I think that was probably one of the next steps. I think that would be cool to do, is to change that code so it's just in and out of the same curve. And I think that's what this App Store proposal is as well, which is there's only, for all the Oracle data feeds, it's just a curve going up and down, instead of there being multiple curves for buying and selling.
Cool. And thanks to everyone for a really interesting call, and Reese for putting this together.
Yeah, thank you everybody so much for coming. It was fun to chat. I feel like it was at least moderately moderately helpful for the people. And I'll be in touch soon in 2018. Everybody have good holidays. And keep on wearing that kind of holiday-ish shirt, Simon. I'm not sure it looks like a sweater. There we go. That's a sweater. Yeah, so definitely have good holidays, and I'll be in touch. Likely, we'll see what the cadence of these looks like, even if they continue going forward, things like that. This is an experiment, but likely I'll be in touch sometime in January of next year to chat about these things. And yeah, thanks all for coming, and see you all in the future.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Reese. Appreciate it.
Goodbye,
Ciao,
everybody.
thanks so much.